clear some space. Yeah, so that was interesting. Some of those women had claimed that it had helped cure their breast cancer. It was some doctor, he was making bread with the flaxseed. So some of his patients just said they had breast cancer, and they believed that his treatment, diet changes, being more health conscious really, and they had believed that his bread with the flaxseed. So they went in and they shut some of these doctors down. I think one got arrested, and they told him if he ever sold the flaxseed bread again, he'd be arrested. Well, and if he claimed that it was curing breast cancer. Well, what was strange is I don't think he was. I think some of his patients were just spreading some rumors that they believed that's what helped them, and then they go and attack innocent people. They do it all the time. Law and Suffering, page 100 in A Map of Life. I love this book. The resistance to sin nearly always involves some degree of suffering. In some cases, it involves terrible suffering, and there are those who would relax the moral law when the suffering caused by obedience to it appears to be extreme. And there are those who would relax the moral law when the suffering caused by obedience to it appears to be extreme. Now, no one can alter God's law. Even the church cannot do that. Within the framework of his law, she may make what we call bylaws binding upon her members, but these must be in accord with God's law, which she cannot change. What is God's law? Man, woman, if I drink water, it hydrates me. If I don't drink water, I'm going to get dehydrated and die after so long without having water. Those are God's laws, and people want to make it into a bunch of bullshit and make money off of it. The point is not always grasped. The church has received from God the power to make laws binding upon her members. By this power, as I have said, is subordinate to the laws stated by God himself as binding upon men. The distinction may be illustrated in the case of marriage. The church cannot grant any of her children a divorce because when they make the contract of marriage, that is to say, agree to take each other as husband and wife for life, God brings into being a new relationship. Now, by God's act consequent upon their contract, they are man and wife. This new relationship, though it follows upon their contract, is not created by their contract, but by God. The church can no more make them cease to be husband and wife than it could make a father and son cease to be father and son. But within the law laid down by God, the church can legislate. It can, for instance, decree that for the marriage of a Catholic, the presence of a priest as witness is necessary. These laws being its own, the church can alter, but she cannot alter the laws given to her by God to be taught to men, nor does she want to. First, and most obviously, because of the nature of the law, has already set out. Yeah, a lot of discussion. So that would be a good example for sure. If someone is not legally married in a binding court of law, there's paperwork, a witness, and they just want to claim to be married and then try to enact marriage laws to take property or whatever else that is, then you can't do that if there hasn't been a law by God or whoever, some conscious being states something, I don't know. First and most obviously, because of the nature of the law, has already set out, as it stands, God law is a statement by man's maker of the right way for men to act. It is an expression of God's knowledge, and for human knowledge to try and change it would be absurd. Human institutions may try to alter the law out of pity for suffering men, but the law they are trying to alter is the law given by one who is infinite love. But even if God's law were a lesser thing than that, the effort of men to make it easier would still be futile. No one but the lawmaker can alter the law. If anyone else claims to, it is of no avail. For at the end of life, it is the lawmaker who is to judge us, and he will judge us according to his laws, and he made them, not according to the modifications introduced into his own laws by men. Yeah, so you want to be careful with people who have no moral ethics. They're trying to cover up crimes. They're very entitled, selfish, crazy people. They think you're evil, and they're going to try to kill you and feel justified. So to them, their laws are justified. Right. So I'm not sure where you want to go with that, but yeah, exactly. There's a lot of common sense here, a lot of noise we can see through, and unfortunately, we have a lot of pigs and immature people in our system. So we're doing the best we can. It is as though one were doing an examination paper and some kindly soul entering the room and discovering that we were in difficulties altered the questions to make them easier for us. His act would undoubtedly make the writing out of paper easier, but it might make the reading of the examination results less pleasant. But there is something worse than mere futility in this altering the moral law to reduce suffering. To make clear what it is, we must look at a little more closely into the nature of suffering. Suffering is not necessarily an evil. As we have seen, a thing is evil if it hinders a being in the attainment of the purpose for which the being exists. In the fullest sense, therefore, a thing is evil for man only if it makes it more difficult for him to save his soul. Now, suffering does not necessarily do so. Only sin is always and necessarily an evil. Ordinarily, observation of life shows that suffering may work in two ways. First, it may be good for the sufferer. We know that a man has never known suffering is soft and undeveloped. His character lacks substance. Immaturity clings about him. And not only do we find that this minimum of suffering is apparently necessary for man's proper development, we also find that really great suffering, if it had been dominated, has the power of enriching the character of the man or woman who has suffered. Suffering, if it ruins some characters, enriches others. It is not necessarily an evil, but may be an immense factor for good, which it is to be depends, for every man, on the way he accepts it. It lies in him to dominate it or to be dominated by. Life is a period of testing. The suffering that arises in it is part of that test. Suffering may be either curable or incurable. If it is physically incurable, a man must put up with it. He has no choice. If it is curable, but only by a breach of the moral law, a man need not put up with it. He has a choice, yet he is morally bound to put up with it. These two sorts of sufferings, the sort that cannot be avoided at all, and the sort that cannot be avoided without sin, represent the test that God allows every man to go through. Every man has not the same test. Some men have more suffering than others, but no man is allowed by God to have more than he can, with the aid of God's grace, bear. Part of the Christian law is love of neighbor, and the relief of suffering is one of the noblest expressions of this love, but it must be within the limits of God's law. Thus, the effort of men to relax the moral law so that others shall not suffer unduly is aimed at altering the test devised by God himself. And there is another thing. Life is not always a testing to see if a man is fit. It is likewise a preparation to make him fit. Suffering, as we have seen, can immediately enrich the soul, and the whole of life represents God's means of bringing a soul to its highest point of development. It is for good to measure the amount of suffering necessary for a man's perfection, and anyone who tries to modify God's law in order to reduce the suffering is ensuring that the soul shall not become as fine a thing as it might. Steel is a beautiful thing, but it has taken an immense heat to bring it to its right perfection. anyone who tries to modify God's law in order to reduce the suffering is ensuring that the soul shall not become as fine a thing as it might. Steel is a beautiful thing, but it has taken an immense heat to bring it to its right perfection. Anyone who has, it were in kindness, cut down the heat to half, would prevent the metal from ever being more than a useless mess. Some suffering is necessary. God knows how much each man needs, and it is by the suffering that could not be legitimately avoided that God shows the measure of what is necessary. The essence of the conquest of suffering is that it should be voluntary. Now, the suffering that one could avoid by committing sin is obviously, in the strictest sense, voluntary. One has exercised a choice, but the suffering that one cannot avoid at all may be equally voluntary. A man can accept it as coming from God's hands, thank God for it as the means by which God is choosing to fit his soul for its eternal destiny, and offer it to God for his own sins and the sins of other men. When man has voluntarily accepted suffering, he has made one of the greatest of human conquests. For men naturally free from suffering and fear of it, acceptance of the truth for a lot of people these days it's a fear of suffering, and they will avoid it at all costs. So unless they see it happening right in front of their face, they're not going to accept it. By an act of, well, some do, some can overcome that power and be willing to take on that truth, as painful as it is. Right, exactly, so unless you're really doing something horrific, right, a lot of the misdemeanors and stuff we try to overlook, and then people say we're letting criminals get away. Yeah, no, we're just looking over a few misdemeanors that are nonviolent and just business and marketing, same thing all these other guys are doing. They just get away with it because they have suits on and are more respected. Yeah, it's the same things. Yeah, so we overlook a lot of that stuff because we're really concerned about innocent people being tortured and abused in the foreign hoax channels. That's causing a lot of violence and war and funding and allocations. You can really get a grip. You gotta get a grip. When man has thus voluntarily accepted suffering, he has made one of the greatest human conquests. For men naturally flee from suffering and fear of it. By an act of one's will, yes, I'm practicing on reading slower out loud. They always tell me that, I gotta slow down. Yeah, Spitfire. By an act of one's will to accept what all men flee from is in itself a triumph. But to go further, as the saints have done, and many who are less than saints, and inflict suffering upon oneself, that is the supreme triumph over human weakness, for it is a positive going out to seek what other men flee from. This infliction of suffering is not, of course, a mere aimless love of suffering, nor does it arise, as some asceticisms have arisen, from hatred of the body or any feeling of the body's worthlessness. It has the immediate practical end of helping to bring the body into proper subordination to the soul, for a body not subordinate can ruin the whole being and fail to achieve its proper freedom as a body. But mortification has another significance, which can be no more than touched on here. As there was a suffering of Christ's natural body, so there is a suffering of his mystical body. The human member can unite his suffering with Christ's and offer them for the whole body. I fill up my flesh, says St. Paul. What is wanting to the suffering of Christ for his body, which is the church? Human life, then, we may see, has a preparing for the life of heaven. It means, on the one hand, complete self-conquest. The soul must conquer the body to bring it into full obedience to God's law, and the soul must itself come into full submission to God. Right, so if you have a church, you think, you can go back through time, you can imagine schools being built, migration, all these different things, cowboys and Indians and saints and sinners and technology, all this stuff going on. Learning how to farm and toil the soil, regenerate, rejuvenate, recycle, reuse it, rejuvenate it. If you see a piece of litter, pick it up. We had a lot of good teachers, didn't we? There were some good ones in the bunch for sure. I do remember that one. She was so cute. Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Right, so if you have a church or a school or a state agency or anyone who's trying to say, yeah, no, you don't beat your children. Okay, well, we just spank them a little bit. Okay, well, what's crossing the law, right? Well, the church needs to mind the state, the law, God, you mind your own business. Well, what you're doing to them, you're doing onto us. So if you're starving them or you're abusing them or torturing them or using them for your own business, it's just another number in your marketing scheme, targets. It's horrible what a lot of people do. Right. It's almost like a farm, isn't it? Right, so when people try to step in and say, yeah, well, that's not right, we should treat each other equally, and then people want to step in and say, well, that one doesn't deserve it, I worked harder, my back hurts, I don't have time to listen to this. So, what can you do? Yeah, that's a good example of that, to kind of bring it to now and understanding some of these things and not get too uplifted. Yeah, something like that. Human life, then, we may see as a preparing for life of heaven. It means, on the one hand, complete self-conquest. Heaven is a place on earth. Solace. The soul must conquer the body and bring it into full obedience to God's law, and the soul itself must come into full submission to God. Can you submit to yourself? I want to do more of this and less than that. What I can't, I need that. Oh, I'm in pain, I have to have this. And no, I got to take that. And a lot of people are plagued by these things and taking pills and medication for emotions, stress, anxiety, having to deal with people like us. It has, from God's church, the truth it needs to know about God and man and its own destiny. From the same source, it has the law which will govern it in the right use of itself and in the right relation of God and duty to others. But has been seen, given that man is to live a life above his nature, he needs those gifts above his nature, which we call the supernatural life. In the next 2 chapters, I shall discuss the life. The supernatural life, how it comes to the soul. The ground of the map is now sketched in. The end of the road of life is heaven, and death is a gateway on the road. God has given us means of knowing all that mass of truth by which we know what God and man are, what life and death mean, what conduct will bring man to heaven. We accept that suffering is part of life. Levels.
What's forced?
Useless. Yeah, there's a lot of basics here that we seem to miss, and people want to focus on trying to cater to things that don't really matter. Yeah, they're very much overstepping their grounds. They're abusing the systems. They're not enforcing the just systems and laws that we have had in place for a long time. They're basic moral, ethical laws that have built a beautiful nation, country, humanity, a lot of good systems, and it's been being destroyed by evil doers, evil people abusing children. And they make a lot of money off of it, and they feel justified, vilified. That's very disturbing. That's all we can do, is continue to try to bring clarity and understanding, the basics, the facts. People should acknowledge the vaccine injured children, the abuse, the targeting mentally ill. Understand that a lot of that was allocated by our lovely government and systems and administrations and state departments, and that they're very justified, and you've all been doing a great job with your watchdog groups and keeping an eye on people, judging, ignoring, exaggerating and emphasizing sarcastic statements, putting children in the hands of dangerous people. Yeah, protecting them from evil people who don't agree with the Western medicine system. Yeah, they think they're evil witches, gonna make you eat grass instead of taking pills. It's so stupid, the extremes they take it to, and we can just really keep it simple. My goodness. Basic hygiene. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Yeah, so we have a lot of people ignoring those things and being absolutely ridiculous. They're being fucking pigs. This has been going on for years, so if you find me offensive and that I shouldn't speak this way and it's not kind, well, we've been treated very unkindly for many years, and so have our children. And the pigs and selfish fucking cunts and nasty people we've been dealing with within and out of the systems, protecting each other, and the trafficking and the bullshit. Yeah, so we got fed up long ago. We were ready to check out in 2012. If you see what happened in 2012 and you go back, what was happening here and in other places, absolutely fucking insane. Yeah, we were ready to check out, not hurt anybody else, but just say, yeah, it's out of our control. We can't do anything. How horrible. And we've seen other people get to that point and take their own lives. Some take other lives before they take their own. Yeah, they're very angry and upset and abused, traumatized. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Well, knowing what we know and just being a caring, kind individual, we couldn't not continue to speak out and try to bring awareness to this. How could you not? Whether it's your children or someone else's. I guess those are the breaks, huh? Yeah. Awesome. I just finished our tea. So good. We have our water. We mixed in a little bit of the greens. I love that stuff. Yes, I will show you. Have your digestive reds and your digestive greens. We just put a little bit in our water sometimes. We don't even put a full dose. 36 superfoods, 29 antioxidants, 21 vitamins and minerals, 6 digestive enzymes, 1 billion CFU of probiotics, 7 in 1 daily gut support, reduce bloating, healthy digestion, gut wall integrity, immune function, inhibiting free radicals, breaks down the gut biofilms. That's what I love about this stuff. Good source of fiber. This stuff is so awesome. So that's your greens, and then you have your reds. Again, this one breaks down these gut biofilms as well. Goji berry, pomegranate. It's awesome. Tasty berry flavor. Hey, Dad. This one is wild berry bliss. Learn more about our clinical trials, published papers, and how biofilms impact gut health. Biome was founded by Dr. Ghanem, one of the world's foremost gut health scientists. 47 plus years of research, 600 plus published science papers, 334,000 plus scientific citations. Has blackcurrant, sweet cherry, raspberry, spinach. Has the choke cherry in it. Those are hard to find, the choke cherries. Parsley, really good. Read one from Men and Deeds, Brother Julian. Xavier Hall, St. John Danvers. Oh, St. Lawrence, Louisville, Kentucky. The St. Lawrence Home, 1908. For some time previous to 1908, a movement had been on foot in the city of Louisville to establish a home where homeless boys of working age might reside and be saved from the perils of city life. The affair was sponsored by Mr. Francis Geer, who, as president of the St. Joseph German Orphan Asylum, found it a problem to place boys too old for the asylum, yet still wards of the society where their faith and morals would not be jeopardized. Mr. Geer laid his plans and hopes before Bishop McCloskey, who, favorably impressed, adopted the proposed institution, formed a board of directors consisting of priests and laymen, and determined on the name St. Lawrence. Armed with authority, Mr. Geer brought out his private resources, a house on College Street, which he placed at the disposal of the board at a monthly rental equivalent to the interest of the amount invested. He intended to deed the property to the board when the rentals would amount to the principal. At the death of Mr. Geer, the house, however, went with the rest of the estate to his sister, who allows it to be used free of rent as long as it functions as the home. By October 1908, the home was ready for occupancy, which Brother Pius, in charge, assisted by Brother Arsenis. One boy was admitted the night before the formal opening and blessing. Soon the number reached 32, as many as the house could accommodate. In the early days of the home, it had a chaplain. The Reverend Michael Melody came each Sunday from the St. Vincent's Girls' Orphanage to celebrate Holy Mass, at which the brothers and the boys communicated. During the week, one brother would attend Mass at St. Xavier's, the other, who remained at home to attend to the boys, would go later to St. Mary Magdalene's nearby. At present, there are about 11 boys resident at the home. The paucity of numbers is accounted for by reason of the cheap enticements outside the liberty which the boys of the day crave. In a large measure, conditions at the home itself are responsible. It is a very fine dwelling house in a quiet, refined neighborhood, but it lacks the facilities to make an institution attractive. There are but 80 ordinary-sized rooms in the house, 4 of these must be used for ordinary purposes, such as kitchen, dining rooms, community rooms for the brothers, the office of the superintendent being in the hallway under the stairs. The remaining rooms are dormitories, and crowding 6 to 8 boys in an ordinary sleeping room is not conducive to health, nor is it comfortable for boys who have worked all day. Again, to allow the boys the full liberty of the streets at night is to offset the very object of the home, yet what attractions has the home to offer? For any mild activity such as tennis or handball, there is not a yard large enough. For the indoor sports in winter, there is not a room large enough for a parlor pool table, even if a room could be spared. The home can give the boy nothing to supplement the streets, with the result that few take advantage of the prospects it holds out in the way of cheap board and the resultant saving of money for future wants. Homes and trade schools are excellent and needed. They cannot thrive on good wishes, and unless there is an unlimited endowment for them, or some other assured means of more than maintenance, they are doomed to failure. While the home has been in operation, it has been managed by Brother Pius, 1908 to 17, Brother Celestine, 17 to 21, Brother Andrew, 21 to 25, Brother Markian, 25 to 29, and at present it is under the management of Brother Borgia. And it starts talking about the Leonard Hall High School, Leonardtown, Maryland. Yeah, these are interesting stories. This is called Men and Deeds. It's written by Brother Julian. The Macmillan Company, Toronto. Yeah, what happened over the years, and you go back and you start reading the stories and just looking in today's time, and clearly you can see it was just overtaken in a lot of the mandates and requirements for these places. It's very similar when you start looking into some of the women programs or abortion clinics. You're required and you have to do certain things in order to get help and services, and that's what happened with a lot of those places. It got taken over by the false beliefs about religion, the syndication and marketing. I know, and then you saw stuff happen decades later. It got so bad, you had Tammy Faye Baker with mascara running down her face, and people were just, what has this become? It's horrible. So it's been a long journey for a lot of people that are aware. If you weren't aware before and you've been becoming aware and educating yourself and using common sense, you can feel it. That's when they say, like time, there's no time, it doesn't exist or something. Because you can have like 50 years of whatever. Yeah, and then if someone was unaware, they knew nothing about it, but then started to educate themselves and become aware, that 50-year span time is now, and you can feel it. You can feel the emotion. If you're a human, some people don't. I don't know. Some don't really put themselves in that space, I guess. Empathetic. Yeah, some will say that. Oh, like empaths and stuff. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, sometimes we're empathetic and sometimes we're not. For anyone to say, oh, that's an empathic person, it's stupid, because we're like, yeah, maybe right now. Talk to us later, you might have a different opinion. You see that all the time with people, right? They'll say, oh, that's a great guy, what a good guy, stand-up person, hard worker. In the same day, you might see that same person, that fucking asshole, I can't stand that motherfucker. I thought you said he was a great guy. Yeah, well, not anymore. I know. Time and space, they say. Time and space. Sun feels good. We'll do a quick one. Van on being human. So bright. I can take it. I will overcome. Map of Life. Oh, this is On Being Human. Van on Being Human. I will read this part, page 46. St. Thomas's triumph lies in the fact that he made his philosophy a wielded organic whole, including and coordinating in the sweep of its horizon the entire panorama of being. To understand the humanism, which is one facet of his philosophy, we must understand his Weltanschauung, his version of the world of reality as a whole. Is that a German word? Weltanschauung, which means his vision of the world of reality as a whole. Man is not to be studied as an isolated phenomenon. He is part of a design infinitely vaster than himself. It is of importance to realize that St. Thomas's metaphysic, like Aristotle's, is theological. In Exegetu Creatorum a primo principio, he says in the sentences, attenditur quadam circulatio vel regatio e quod omnia revert later sica infinem in ed quos sec principio promidentrant. He sees the birth of the worlds, the march of centuries, has an emanation from the infinite, which in a vast sweep runs its course back to the abyss of energy from which it sprang. The Aristotelian idea of potentiality applies to the universe as a whole, each eternity aspiring towards its popular actualization. The cosmos itself is viewed as yearning for its fulfillment. The desire of the soul for assimilation with the Godhead is the supreme human example of this general trend. Man's fulfillment is his divinciation. His becoming divine is a human mode, for here one may not separate in St. Thomas the philosopher from the theologian. He views man as revelation has shown him to be, called by God's mercy to the fulfillment not only of his natural potentialities, but of his obediential potentialities, also in the way of grace. Pico della Mirandola lauded St. Thomas for his perfect balance. It is seen in its fullest expression in this outlook, which embraces all reality, in which nothing is overstressed, nothing is ignored. Thomism is far removed from pseudo-mysticism, from mechanism, equally far from hedonism and materialism. Truth, beauty are given their due on every plane. Matter and spirit coordinate and subordinate. The contemplation of the things which God has made is good. For this consideration bestows on man a certain likeness to the divine perfection. For it was shown that God, by knowing himself, beholds all other things in himself. Since then the Christian faith teaches man chiefly about God, and makes him to know creatures by the light of divine revelation, there results in man a certain likeness to the divine wisdom. We'll take a break there. I know, I've been trying to practice my out loud reading. I like doing it. It's kind of fun. It's like a mental, it's kind of challenging. Yes. Oh, the small accolades. Thank you. You're welcome. Yes, we're here. Any questions, comments, or concerns?